All right, so howdy y'all. Thanks for coming out. This is the Clarksville Region Historical Society. You all need to join before you are allowed to leave the room. Just kidding, but if you join, you help us do good things like this. It's actually the continuation of a year-long series I had on local history at the Senior Center. For those of you guys that participated in that, thanks for coming out for that. It was fun, but we wanted to get a bigger venue for a bigger topic. So this is Tony Mansour. For those of you that don't know the big picture story, Tony bought most of what is El Dorado Hills in 1981. So he didn't invent El Dorado Hills. It was here before then, as were some of the people here in the front row. Some rocket scientists we know in the front row were here. It was a dead project, basically, at that point. It had reached a small percentage of its potential. This is Louis Mansour. He's Tony's son, and he was integrally. He was very involved from the beginning.
I like that.
And I don't have to yell because I have a microphone. Oh, cool. All right. Louis, try your microphone, make sure it works.
Well, thank you for inviting me here to do this. Mark had an idea. He said, you got an age in your life right now where you're part of the history. And before you forget everything, I want to pick your brains. So I'm here. Because, a few more years, probably won't remember my name. I look at the faces here, and I need to acknowledge some of the faces.
How about that one real quick?
Brian, get over here.
Over here.
I want to acknowledge some of the faces that I came across when we got involved with the project, and I'll come back in the project. And standing in front row is John, worked with John since 1980-81 at the Area Planning Committee. Mr. Sweeney met in 84. We worked all the way through the Board of Supervisors approval. Doug really was a co-inventor of the town center with me. And I go down the line over here, go to Joyce, where she got into our organization back in the 80s with Brian Holloway back in the early 80s, and they were in charge of the DRC. That's what it was, among other things. I come back and go back here and go to the present. Jerry Canales, our controller, has been with us for a long time too. Next to her is our assistant and executive office manager, Crystal. My son Jack, who's the CEO of the company, and my son Louis, who's the president of the company. And I forgot anybody, please let me know. And I see a lot of people here that I've dealt with over the years. I want to just give you a brief rundown on the history, because he kept asking me, what did you do before you did this? And he kept, hey, another guy from the old days. Real fast, most of you know my history, my background. I'm a refugee. I'm an immigrant, and I'm legal. I came here and adopted this country as my mother country, and I love it. And I came here for better life, for democracy, and opportunities. I worked hard from the 60s all the way to my 70s and developed a network of friends and a little bit of money we put together, and we started working in real estate. About June 19, 1979, I was selling TVs. I was sitting on top of a stack of boxes of TVs, and I got a phone call from a friend overseas. He said, I got this broker over here, there's a town for sale. I said, okay. We're in Sacramento, give me the number. I called the number, I jumped on PSA and got out here, and the broker met me at the airport. We drove 7,500 acres. How do you see it? I had no idea. We got in the car, we drove up to Green Valley, all the way down to Wetzel Oviatt, and looked around. He said, I like it. 2 hours later, I wrote a personal check for $50,000. I said, let's try to make a deal.
That was a deposit, not the whole thing.
Well, this is where the thing started, really. And that's, then we I had to deal with a partner that brought us the deal. It took us about 8 months just to buy the partner out because he had different objectives than we did. If you look at all those parcels, they said, we can sell this and this and this and this. I said, hey, hold on. No. I said, we don't want to do what Hancock did. Hancock was selling piecemeal. Look at those piecemeal. We want to stop that one. So our pre-acquisition, what we did is we got rid of our partners and we bought them out, and we developed put our arms around all the 90 parcels, and we found out that a lot of those titles, they don't exist. I mean, Hancock didn't even have titles, some of that property. And we had to get a certificate of compliance from the state. So it took us like 30 months to close that deal.
Okay, I want to interrupt.
When
Hey, people don't know, everybody, so basically the prior owner accumulated a whole bunch of ranches. And there's actually a spreadsheet back there leaning on those chairs that shows what those ranches were and what they paid for them.
As he just stole my next act. So during our pre-acquisition, we start looking. Somebody name come up, said, we start digging out the archives. There's Alan Lindsay, there's Growing, there's this. I live in Los Angeles, and I know the Growing company, and I know the Haley, another one of the members of the team. Okay, so we looked at this. I love you, Mike. You gave maybe 100 pages on the Lindsay Grumman, and you gave hundreds of hours on a plan that never gone anywhere, and you're going to give us an hour and a half on the 36 years when we build the new town.
You're welcome.
We'll try to get it. The land assembly idea was brilliant. The Victor Growing plan was a plan that had its challenges. It was just a map on a piece of paper with colors that was never vested. And Jack can explain one day about the vesting. It was, they couldn't put their feet to the fire to build it according to that plan because there was nothing under the Subdivision and Subdivided Map Act and all those development agreements and specific plans in place at that time to vest a map. It had a great concept. It was a village concept. But it was mixed use. If you look at it somewhere back there, it had, where is it? It had residential, industrial next to it, then high density and commercial, so forth and so on. One of the observations we looked at was it had multifamily at 40 units per acre throughout El Dorado Hills. It had a population of 75,000 people. I hate to tell you, Mike, but that plan was done on paper. Victor Road never came out to El Dorado Hills, and that's when we discovered at the time we looked at that plan. That's being said. Thanks for bringing me up to date and up to speed to that one. What challenges we met? Growing plan. Thank you. What challenges we met pre-acquisition? The biggest challenge we met was water rights. All of a sudden we found out that the Bureau had, or whatever, the El Dorado Hills County Water District entered into contract in 1964 at 35,000 acre feet, was redone in 73 to 7,500 acre feet. They're going to bring it down to about 2,000, 3,000 acre feet, and we get involved in renegotiating that agreement. And I have the background on water, how did it come about from the 60s all the way out to the 90s is here. Please take it, and if you have any questions, call me. I don't need to bore you with all this. We end up closing escrow, well, with the water issue over here, and I'm going to mention two things. We needed the water. EID was practically broke. As a matter of fact, they had a moratorium on the treatment plant up that goes into Folsom, and they said no more hookups, nothing. Why? Because EID needed $400,000 to fix that and stop. Hancock jumped in, gave him the $400,000, then we reimbursed Hancock when we closed the deal, right? Where's Bill? You remember that story, Bill?
I do.
Yeah. Please, you jump in, correct me if I, well, memory is not that great nowadays. But if you jump in, let me know. Not only we subsidized EID to the extent of $400,000, but when we helped renegotiate the water rights to Eldorado Hills, they had to pay $9 per acre feet for about 6,000 acre feet. It was like $55,000 a year. EID didn't have the money. We paid it for 6-7 years, and we got a resolution from EID that we had the right to that water. That we ultimately we gave it up because something else took place after that time. We closed the deal in 1981, 30 months after we did this. All of a sudden I find out, here is a young kid, 40-some years old, got his arms around, that was 5 years later. I was a lot younger. Look at this thing here. What can a kid do with this? The question comes to everybody's mind is, what made you buy this? Everybody asks me. The first thing comes out of my mouth is ignorance. And it's, if I knew then what I know now, I would have took a PSA back and ate more peanuts and watched those hot pants ladies go up and down the aisles, and that would be the end of it.
It was the hot pants steward.
Yes. But I said, okay, this is a challenge for the students that just left and for the people that are starting a life when you start looking at investment. When you look at an investment, don't look at the dollar signs going up. Look at the downside. Look at the dollar signs going down. Can you afford to buy it? Can you afford to lose? What can you do with it? So I checked with a few of my friends and said, okay, we got 7,000 to 8,000 acres. We have no idea what to do with it. Are you guys, and these are friends and relatives, we're going to pool our money, we're going to buy. The worst we can do is we big ranchers, we can be big landowners, we each can build a house on 1,000 acres, and that's the end of it. So that was our downside. Well, it wasn't enough, because as I tell you my life story, since I was a kid, I always had a dream. And the dream was verified also that by my sisters, that I used to go in the backyard and play with clay and get buildings here and buildings there. They said, what are you doing? I said, I'm trying to build a city. And I was like 11, 12, 13 years old and kept that in my mind. I'm not bragging about this, but this is really, I thought, I didn't think about it when I bought it, but I thought about it afterwards, because it just so happens. What did we do the first thing after we closed the deal? We tried to put our arm around 90 parcels and manage the golf course. And I'm not going to answer any questions yet. The golf course was losing $100,000 a year when we bought it. Joyce, you remember? We turned around, that golf course was doing 92,000 rounds a year, 350 plus or minus rounds a day, and it was making us $300,000 a year profit. And that was my pride and joy. It was close to my heart, and that's all I can tell you. We also looked around, we found out, okay, now we got water rights, but how do you take it out of Folsom Lake, and how do you build the infrastructure, how do you finance the infrastructure? So we end up forming assessment district, and all that is in the history. We get over there, and to provide the funding mechanism to bring water out of Folsom Lake, expand the sewer treatment plant, and put in place facility charge and pay as you go. So at the end of the day, Eldorado Hills not only will have water, but have transmission lines to transmit that water, because this town needed not to think about how do you transmit water from here to there. So we solved that problem back in the 80s. There was another big thing, and I think, George, you remember you were there, negotiating with PG&E. It took about maybe 6 to 8 months, almost a year, because when we showed up to the scene, as some of you remember, Bill, how much was the electric bills in the villages you were building? Was
Too high.
too high. So we said we can't plan anything in this area with electric bills in a 2-3 bedroom house were $600-700 a month, and that was then. So we worked with PG&E to bring natural gas, and we imposed through our conditions and approvals that Brian did all those villages here that we will require every way to have their underground utilities, wet and dry utilities, so when PGE gets there, they'll be ready to do that. So that's what we did for the first 3-4 years. Then the 1984 Olympics, I was in Los Angeles sitting, having a beer with the chairman of the board of, used to be Colonel Banker, who became CB, and a few other of my friends in real estate. They said, hey man, so what are you going to do with that acreage over there? I said, we're still working on it. They said, come on, you're going to get too old to just do something. He said, there's an organization called the Urban Land Institute. Yeah. Urban Land Institute is a worldwide organization of developers, planners, financial institutions, lawyers, consultants, everybody else. So I said, the deal is you can ask them to come out there and you give them all the data you want, and they'll analyze your project, and they'll tell you whether you really have a project or you just build your ranches and go home. Well, we prepared our book to send to ULI. The first thing we did is those maps. We don't have them. Okay.
Maps in the back.
Hey, if you look back on the walls over there, the Urban Land Institute, before they come out, they have to read, what is El Dorado Hills? What do you have, okay? What kind of topography, what kind of vegetation, what kind of water rights you have, what's your view sheds and everything else. So we spent several months with engineers and consultants to prepare and analyze all of the 7,000 acres so people will be able to analyze it and plan it. Unlike the growing plan, when they put multifamily on top of a hill that's 30% slope, but that's neither here nor there. That's probably planning. So it just so happened that 1985, March of 85, we brought the ULI panel, and these are the panelists. And this is me. We just landed the helicopter. Before that, we had the chairman of the ULI panel came with the helicopter. He said, what do you have in mind? We landed on top of, the first time we landed was in 84, on top of the, where the clubhouse is. It was a big tree. It was also, weather wasn't that bad. It was not that good either. It was in October 84. And his name was Bob Mayhouse. He said, what do you have in mind? I said, you know what? I don't know, but it looks like, we might have a golf course coming down here, and maybe driving range. I never played golf. We owned the golf course. I only knew that people do this. And, I said, okay, let's see. So they come back in March. They go Rancho Marietta. And what they do is they don't want you to give them an input. They want to do their own analysis. Brian will sit there, we'll sit in a room next door. We don't know who's coming, who's going. And they interview people, they bring their own. They don't want your input. It's like doing an appraisal. They don't want your input. They want to do their own thing. And we had a choice to either do that deliberation or finding out whether you have a project in public or you do it in private. We elected to do it in public. That's how I met Jack Sweeney. Because we had a big thing down Rancho Marietta, and Jack was about to run for the board. And that's the first time I met him, and we've been the best friends ever since. Anyway, after the ULI came with the recommendations, now what do you do next? They said, hey, you have a project. Golf course sounds good. This is what you should do. And there's a book here somewhere. And I don't want to bore you with the details, but they validated the fact that when I came out here and I said we're going to do or develop or leave the residents of Eldorado Hills in a better place where anybody else done before and create a first-class community, I think the idea was validated by the ULI. Now the challenge is how to proceed, how do you fund it, how do you do all that stuff that really brought us to where we are now. We assembled the consultants and we did all the planning and everything else. We started the preparation of a specific plan. And I'm going to read some of my notes here because I remember the sequence of that happens. We did the IRR, identified the infrastructure needed. We did the elaborate traffic study. That elaborate traffic study generated the need for traffic impact fees. That's the time where we discovered, we said, okay, God, the county, what are you doing with $300 traffic impact fees? What can you build? We can't even build the signal with $300. So our traffic consultants devised a traffic impact fees at that time, which was 5 or 6 times time what the county was paying, was charging. And we asked the county to participate in the program where they can do their own traffic analysis and raise their fees, but they elected, okay, we'll stay with it. That's what happens. That's why Eldorado Hills today have roads and have infrastructure, and the county is still suffering without roads and infrastructure because we had to put down a system in place to pay for those 4 lanes and 2 lanes and the signals and everything else. So having said all of this, by the time we got the specific plan approved, Brian came to join the organization, was one of the first persons to
I was, yeah. But it was when we did the ULI.
join back in the 80s.
Yes.
And Brian helped put the specific plan together with us, and a few other people here. Joyce was present, and I have to mention my brother-in-law Albert, that passed away several years ago, was very instrumental in doing that, and I have to recognize him in another area position. 89, we did the specific plan, and we had people banging our doors. I want to buy it. I want to buy it. I want to buy it. So okay, we had 3 offers. We took the lowest offer. The lowest offer came from elite businessmen. Was Anderson, Powell, Lou Riggs of Tyker, and they brought Parker as a developer. He was just, he was going to develop the deal. Before you know it, they were bought out, and they end up with the place. Did we make a good choice? We made an excellent choice. Did they develop it the way we wanted? I think in some areas was beyond expectations. And I'll leave it at that.
And this is Serrano, for those of you that don't know all this. He's talking about the Serrano project.
Yeah. I'm going to take a little break, and I'm going to turn it over to Brian, because we had a problem as we were developing the plan for this, and when we got the specific plan approved, it included the town center, which is both sides, and there was zone commercial, all that. We'll get into that later on. But I want Brian to address all those little villages here, and he came out with a great idea. I'll give you the mic for a few minutes.
Okay.
And I gotta set you up. I'm sorry.
Uh-oh.
So what Tony actually acquired was some large parcels where today there is a project called Serrano and another project called Blackstone and then Town Center. But there was also a bunch of what he has called out-parcels that were little landlocked neighborhoods or villages from going back to the Lindsay Gruen era. And they were considered separate, and they had to decide what to do with them. Brian.
Oh, yeah. Hi. So I came to El Dorado Hills from a development company in Sacramento called Moss Land Company. Had a largest real estate company in the Sacramento area called Moss and Moss. So part development company, part real estate company. And what was interesting is, and I recall later on, my father was the first real estate salesman hired by Henry Moss for Moss and Moss Realty. Actually, at the time, it was called Moss and Lindsay. Ring a bell? Mm-hmm. Yes. Lindsay left, and Henry Moss didn't really have a problem, so he brought in his brother's name, hence the other Moss, who was the congressman at the time. And he never really worked in real estate. He was a congressman, but he liked having his name with the company. And I had heard from Henry Moss that he had been partners in this El Dorado Hills project. In fact, they actually built the sales office that is now the CSD headquarters. And he told me a story about how it was done in a circular fashion, and that I'd never been up here, so I had no idea that you could have the sales people in the offices with their customers looking to buy the property. And there was a secret hallway inside with one-way mirrors. So the manager of the office could actually go around and see how the sales pitch was going with these people. And I never really paid much attention to it because Henry Moss was a good storyteller, and he had several failed projects. But we did have large projects. We had Delta Shores, which started in 1966, got approved last year, about 1,000 acres, Tree Lake Village in Placer County. He had large projects, but never really got them going. It took somebody else to do it. So anyway, the first time I came up here, first thing I did was I went to that sales office and got in there, and sure enough, there was the one-way mirrors, which just blew me away. But so what happened was, I was working for Henry Moss, and I was looking for a change. I had this deal that I cut with myself that if I worked for somebody for 5 years and I didn't get fired, I would quit because I clearly hadn't pushed hard enough, and I had done my 5 years with Henry Moss. And Tony's lawyer called me up one day, and I was on the planning commission at the time, and he said, "Hey, I've got this gentleman from Southern California who's got 7,000 acres in El Dorado Hills, and he sells TVs, and he really, he needs some help trying to figure out what he's going to do with this property." And so very quickly, I called Tony, and he said, "Let's meet at the Red Lion." And we did, and we met in the lobby, and he was going to show me the maps of the property, but he had locked the briefcase, and he couldn't open it. And so my job interview for one of the best jobs I've ever had was Tony and I watching Dallas. And that was it. And the next day...
We waited till Dallas was over before you...
That's true. So the next morning, we went to lunch or breakfast with Tony and his business partner, Nazar. And there was this other gentleman at the table, too, a guy by the name of Tom Camby. And Nazar and Tony went to make phone calls because they really didn't quite have cell phones yet. They were just about coming. So Tom and I are sitting at this table by ourselves, and Tony and Nazar have left to go find payphones. And we finally realized that Tony and Nazar are interviewing us both, right, for this job. And so I said, "Well, what do you do?" And he says, "Well, I do financial stuff." And he goes, "What do you do?" And I said, "I do entitlements." And I said, "That's it, well, I'm hire us both." And he did. So that was the team, Tony and Tom Camby and I for quite a while until Albert came along. But as we were going through the...
I'm going to add one more person.
Yes.
Don Andrews.
Don Andrews, yep.
Don Andrews joined the team. He was really...
Very much a part of the team.
Very much instrumental in a lot of keeping our heads straight, a lot of pushing and pulling back and forth, but finally one of us prevailed.
And more great stories.
Yes.
So while we were doing the specific plan, Tony had these leftover parcels and kind of at the edges of the specific plan area, and they annoyed me because we weren't really able to include them in the plan. Some of them were kind of disconnected, and I realized they all had roads and some houses nearby, and so there was a whole bunch of them, but they added up to a lot of acreage. And so one day I said to Tony, I said, "Let's do this. How about we take the out parcels while we're doing the specific plan, and we entitle them as tentative maps or get zoning, whatever we need to do, and let's entitle them and sell them and generate some revenue for this project, because I knew that his business partners were having to make annual cash calls. So let's create some revenue here and see what we could do. And we did. And we entitled every out parcel that we decided to go forward with, and we sold each one of them. And I considered that quite a success, doing something, generating revenue while you're putting together a very large land plan that's going to take a number of years. So that was kind of the story of the out parcels. The other thing that I didn't know that I was going to get into was that when Tony bought the property, he inherited the Architectural Control Committee for all of El Dorado Hills, 10,000 acres, existing homes, future homes, which when you read the bylaws, every house, every new home, every re-roof, oh my God, every paint job had to apply, we had to meet, we had to consider it, we had to review it. Every week we did that. And the best part was we were able to have Don Andrews as a member of the Architecture Control Committee. And the meeting started off, before we even started the meeting, there was a bottle of vodka in the freezer. And that was the start of every Architectural Control Committee. And unfortunately, Tony, without my knowledge, made me the chairman of this thing. So it was a lot of fun. So that's the story of the out parcels and the Architectural Control Committee.
The thing that we need to emphasize, and once we took possession of the parcels and we stopped that piecemeal thing going on, we started putting CCNRs on all of those.
We did. We put CCNRs on everything to control it. Yeah.
And then some of the newcomers that came, I mean newcomers, the ones that came in the 80s and 90s and all that, we have our name on their deed restrictions.
So just one other thing that I didn't realize is that when we did this, wanting to sell the parcels, there were more than 5, so we needed to get a public report from the Department of Real Estate. And the Department of Real Estate had never done a subdivision report for as large and as many discontiguous parcels that were contiguous with other property but were being subdivided and sold separately. And so we worked with the State Department of Real Estate and the chief lawyer for Hancock, because they needed to approve all this and they needed to release every property from the basic mortgage as we sold each one of these. And so became friends with the head of the Department of Real Estate, because that's what it took to get this thing done, because they had never done it again. And it took becoming friends over the phone with the chief attorney for Hancock in Boston, who I have visited with, and we are still friends and get Christmas cards every year and visit with Pat Sullivan from Hancock.
Oh, okay.
So,
All right.
how's that?
That's wonderful. I'm going to go back a little bit on the planning process, and I was probably facetious by saying the growing plan was done in Los Angeles over the desk in those days. They didn't have the computers and the CADs and all that thing. What we did is we bladed the road all the way up to the hill. Remember, George, you take the picnic basket up there. All our planners, all our engineers, and all the team members had to plan on the site. We built a gazebo up on the hill, and we walked every inch of that property to plan it, addressing topography, vegetation, everything else. When we were designing the road to connect this road to Bass Lake, I had several fights with our engineers and several trips. You look at the roads, because every time we walk up those things and I see a yellow ribbon on a tree, I said, what does this mean? I said, it goes away. I said, move the road. I said, it's expensive. I said, that tree is 300 years old. What would you move it? Remember those Gene Thorne and I was just going like this? I can't move the road. I gotta. So you can't build it here. You can't take that road, that tree down. That's talking about trees is going to get me the next thing. Our first development we did in El Dorado Hills, grounds up, was Park Oaks Village. And the reason we did Park Oaks Village That's when Doug and Louis and I and another person got into it. I was in Mexico and Louis said, there's this guy, I don't want to mention name, wants to buy those acres on the hill, wants to build a 2-story building, wants to take the oak tree. I said, no. He said, but he's going to pay $6 a foot and all that stuff. I said, no, we're not going to sell it. What's the option? He said, we're going to build it. I said, we'll build it? I said, okay. I come back and Doug Wheel over there and Louis and somebody else says, okay, we're going to build those things. This is what we built, those brick buildings you see in front of the old golf course. This is the first thing we've done out of the hills. And I said, hey, build them, they'll come. We built something that we weren't competing with Bill because his prices were a lot better than ours. Right, Bill? We were about twice as rent as you have.
We didn't take
away anybody from you, did we?
We didn't have too much commercial then, so.
Well, that was quasi-office, but this is really gave us the feel of El Dorado Hills can handle the best. If you build the best, they will occupy it, they will come to it. And that's where that whole town center thing, when we went to the south and said, okay, you're not going to do just a simple run-of-the-mill retail, just to have little strips here and there. Although our jumping to the town center, although our town center originally, when it was approved by the planning commission, the board of supervisors, the specific plan, really had a shopping mall in the heart of the town center, right there. And that shopping center, if we were to build it today, it would have been a floating shopping center floating in the lake, and and this thing, because the wetland was coming in. Lou will tell you the story in a little while. And so I'm going to jump into the town center for a minute, because we had the town center east and west, and there are exhibits over there what they look like. The town center east is where the town center is today, and it was planned, it was zone general commercial. We did the PD in 1995, and we had a very capable staff member work for us, and unfortunately we lost her because she had end up marrying some judge. Her name was Patricia Edmond, and she was very instrumental in bringing getting the specific plan approved with us, and was a good team member. And she used to drive the Jeep and serve the picnic baskets and everything up there. And at the end of the day, she did the PD just about on her own. She came through the ranks, and she was able to write the PD. And the PD is a plan development. When we had the joint commercial, when we had the joint commercial approved, the county was not going to let us just build anything we want. So you got to do a PD overlay, which means we want to know what you're going to build, and we want you to theme it. And these are the exhibits over there, what originally was. It transitioned from an original mall to a big box, if you see that one. And the big box was going to be like similar to what Folsom had, and we couldn't attract big boxes, and there was nothing. That was a trend. It had a lot of fast food at that time, because all we thought was there's a McDonald's here, there's Jack in the Box there, there's all that. After all this thing here was put together, we got to know the area, we get to know the demand and all that, we shifted gears. And the gears were shifted to where we came out with a Main Street concept. And I'm going to have Louis jump in and talk about the Main Street concept and the building theming and all the features and all that. How did the plan evolve from mall to that? Lift that up a little bit.
Bring it over here.
Bring it here. I mean, it's an evolution of the process. And you know what? You put something on paper, and you want to do the right thing. Sometimes what somebody puts on the paper, it doesn't work. At the end of the day, you got to change it. And that's why it took, we're 36 years into the project, and I'm still here. And the project is not done yet. So you can't just have a piece of paper and run it and go with it. Louis, talk a little bit about the planning and the design and the concept.
Hello. One of the things things is right here is Dad kept on telling me one day, I want to do a Main Street. We want a Main Street. Where I grew up in Los Angeles, Hancock Park, there's a street there called Larchmont Boulevard, which is similar to what you see in Town Center now, which is retail, office over retail, going down one street, about 3 blocks. It's where I grew up. Riding our bikes, going to the stores, going to get lunch and everything, Baskin Robbins. So it was, let's try to do something here. So granted, in the 94, 95 plan, it had the big boxes and things changed. The markets, different things happened. Big boxes were kind of going elsewhere, wasn't going to come here. Shopping malls were kind of being slowed down. Highway commercial was changing even. We saw one of the first migrated gas stations here, the old Texaco, if you remember, with a taco time. Okay, that was one of the first of its kind that had a co-branded situation. Now you see them all over the place.
All of a sudden started eliminating a lot of pad uses. So we came back and said, how do we do this? Let's create a Main Street. Well, and then we also talked about doing a market drug over here where you have Nugget and Was Long's, CVS, and that's the marketplace right now that's over here. And Doug Wheely said, okay, to do that here, when he got involved, he goes, Louis, can we move the creek? And I said, hold on, let me make a few phone calls, let me see what I can do. And made some calls, talked to some people in the fishing game, and came back and said, yeah, there's a way we could do it. So we ended up taking the creek and moving it from here to here. Okay? And this part stayed the same and moved it over here. In doing so, also said, okay, well, we moved the creek, now let's create an amenity while we're doing this. And let's create a body of water. Because as you know, in a town center, in the center of town, you need something. You need an attraction. You need something that it's not just, we don't want to just create a shopping center that you're having dinner looking at parked cars. At the time, you can go to Folsom. I think there was a couple restaurants there, higher-end restaurants, and even down to Sacramento, and you're sitting there looking at the front end of a parked car. That's not what we wanted to create here. We wanted to create an atmosphere. So in doing that, created the lakes, or the ponds, or the habitat. And as well as there was another thing that was going on at the time in El Dorado Hills. There was the Carson Creek drainage study that was taking place. And that study was looking at all of the drainage corridors all the way down to the Consumnes River. And there was a problem. There was a problem with, a lot of you probably remember, White Rock Road used to flood every time it rained. Okay, when it was just 2 lanes and stuff, it used to rain. Any time it rained, it used to flood. Other things used to happen along with Carson Creek coming down this way here. There was a couple breaches into the mobile home park, and there was big concern there. So in doing this, what we did is said, okay, the drainage study was concluded and said there needed to be certain amounts of retention or detention of stormwater, but there was no place to put it. So we worked with the county and said, okay, we could do it here. We're going to have our lakes here. That's going to create some detention, but then we're going to create a detention basin here to solve the overall problem further on downstream. You know, and that's one of the functions that this corridor has, is creating that detention for everything. And now Dusty Creek, or the old Dusty Creek here in White Rock, doesn't flood anymore. We also did that when we did over here at the entrance to Blackstone or Valley View, right in here. Carson Creek did the similar type thing for a similar reason, in order to create better hydrology as it came around this corner, and it didn't just come here and make a left turn. So there we had the amenity, the lake. We started building the first building there where Cafe Campanile is, or was, and Milestone is now. And Dad came into town, and he was walking around, and he comes up to me and he goes, "Show me what everybody's talking about when we're talking about sitting on this patio at the restaurant and wanting to see the water." He goes, "I'm confused. What water? What are they talking about?" So I took him out there and I put a chair out and I sat him down and he looked out and he goes, "When did we get a lake?" So, and part of that is then you get into the architecture. Okay, I had the architects bugging me. What's it going to look like? What's it going to look like? I don't know. And I kept on working on different ideas, traveling around. Finally, I kind of came up with, let's emulate a European village. Let's bring in some old textures. And a planner who I very highly regard, I was sitting with him in New Mexico. We were looking at another large project there. And he said, "What are you going to do there?" And I said, "I'm going to do kind of a French country village or European country village and really make it look authentic." He goes, "Be careful. Many have tried, many have failed. And if you're going to do it, you got to do it right." And that's what we let out to do. I mean, the textures, it's not just the look and the building lines. As you know, it follows the textures and the feel and everything, even to bringing in authentic 150-year-old olive trees, importing, bringing them in there, in the textures of the concrete, in the stonework, everything. It's not one piece, it's all of it that puts it together. And what we want to achieve, and I think we did, is something that with every step you take, you get a different smell, feel, you see something different, you hear something different. You don't have piped music that you constantly hear the same music playing as you go through and walk down the street or through a mall. You know, this is what a real Main Street is. It's different. And it's like something Dad said, and Doug has said also, it's got to be imperfect. Okay, fine. It's imperfect. People today sit there and go, the buildings, it's got cracks in it and it's got the white streaks on it. Okay, fine. It's an old building. It's not perfect. We're not Disneyland. And that was the whole premise of creating the feel and the texture that you have today, is not doing it perfect.
Olive trees.
I said, yeah, the olive trees. You like that? They were originally brought over from Palermo, Italy, and we found them in Oroville. They were taking out an orchard there, and I found them in Oroville, or excuse me, not Oroville, Orland, and worked out a deal and had them transported over here, and we transplanted them and placed every one of them, and we have pictures of myself and my now wife, who I thought she was going to show up, but it took us 12 years to get married. But of us actually spinning the tree, and she would sit there and stand there and say, "No, no, no," until it was right perfect, and then set the tree. And I think that's
it.
That's it. I don't want to take away from Doug.
All right, Doug, come out here. Although Doug was instrumental in creating the merchandising, helping us the merchandising and the philosophy behind the town center. And all of you got 5 minutes there.
Mike, this is your story.
Mike told me we got 15 minutes.
Okay, great.
10 minutes.
So I'm Doug Wheely. I have been a consultant of Tony's since 1996. Last month marked my 40th year in business. Half of that time working with Tony. First 10 years doing some brokerage, second 10 years starting a development company, and then shutting it down, if you remember the S&L crisis of the early 90s. In the East Bay, my wife and I were both born and raised there, living there, and her brother had a house up on Marble Ridge off Bass Lake Road. Tony got his project approved to the PD in 1995, and in 1995 he put up this crazy sign on Highway 50 that said El Dorado Hills Town Center. And we were driving up the hill to see Dick, and it was a strange sign because there wasn't a house to be seen. So what do you mean town center? Where's the town? Curiosity got the better of me, and in August of 1996, I drove up to El Dorado Hills, got the number off the sign, and called. I mean,
You called Haley.
it might have been Haley, I don't recall. The next thing you know, Tony shows up on site, and we spent the rest of the afternoon together. He drove me all around El Dorado Hills. I had been doing a lot of work in downtown Walnut Creek, moving bullocks out, bringing Nordstrom in, a lot of work in downtown Lafayette, sort of reimagining downtown Lafayette. And I really loved downtowns and street retail. Like, Louis grew up in the Larchmont district of LA. I grew up in the Oakland Hills and hung out in the Montclair district. And I was in the shopping center business, but I have to confess that shopping centers really bore me. I like the texture that comes from the imperfection of who put this building next to that building and where did that odd merchant come from. I really like things that are more organic. The conversation with Tony it evolved to the point where he said, look, we've never built anything taller than a fire hydrant. Can you come help put together a merchandise plan and a land plan? Bring your expertise, such as it is, come help us out. You know, none of us really know what we're doing. Who had ever turned a 100-acre horse pasture into downtown? But he said, I only want one thing. I want you to move here. I want you to move your company. I want you to move your family. And I had to come home and explain to Carol, I think we're moving. She was great. She was born and lived in the same house from the day she was born until the day we got married. And we had a nice little house in Orinda. And it took her about 5 minutes to say, you know, this sounds like a great adventure. Off we go. So 97, we moved here. So the whole second half of my career has been tied up with Tony. As Louis said, we really wanted to create a place that wasn't about national chains and fast food. We wanted a place that was reflective of the community and culture that was evolving here in El Dorado Hills. It's a very unique place. Fairly high household incomes, high disposable incomes, very high college education levels. It's really a new place, a unique place. And so the idea was to play to the community that lived here and wanted to live here and create a place. The great joys looking back was watching when the local realtor started mentioning proximity to the town center and listing houses, that we had created a place that in a community that really didn't have a central business district, one came together. It was a great team effort. It was a lot of fun. When I showed up, multimodal parking facility was here, McDonald's was here, the gas stations were here, the post office was here. And that was it. It was then building a business plan, bringing in the traffic generating uses that we needed to populate the street. You know, in 1996, nobody, except for those of us in Latrobe, lived south of the freeway. How do we get everybody who lives north of the freeway to come south? We need a grocery store, we need a drugstore, we need a movie theater. These were the early, really critical deals. Some deals came along that we never even thought about. We got a call from a guy who said, would you like a car dealer? No, I don't know. I don't think so. Yeah, but you don't understand. It's Mercedes-Benz. Oh, well, that's a pretty good advertiser. Maybe we would like that. We got lucky along the way. You know, Yvonne Chalet and his wife Mary showed up looking for a place to locate Cafe Campanile, looking for outside dining, looking for something wonderful, and we're very grateful for them. Tony Morabito approached us about wanting to do an authentic Italian deli. A kitchenware store, an art gallery. We were really fortunate early on. We wanted a hotel. We went through, I can't tell you how many hotel operators who wanted to put their hotel up on Highway 50. And we said, no, hotels on the freeway are easy. We want one in the middle of town. We want a hotel where you can step out of your room and find 3 or 4 restaurants right there, and you don't have to get in your car, or you can just walk around the lake. God bless us, Charlie McDermott showed up and shared that vision. Charlie got very angry with Louis when, after having designed his building with this beautiful Mediterranean architecture, this white, I don't know what you call it, shows up next door. Charlie said, I thought this was going to be all Tuscan. No, nobody ever told him that.
Not Tuscan.
No, not Tuscan.
Very French.
You know, we got lucky. The movie theater, we think, was a critical deal. And they're very hard deals to make. American Multi-Cinema had made a deal at Broadstone in Folsom, and we got discouraged. Then 2 years later, they filed for bankruptcy. And a neighbor of mine from Orinda owned Signature Theaters. He had a theater in Placerville. He was polite enough to return our call. It took Tony and I 3 years to run him to the ground to get the deal done. Yeah, well, that's to get it open.
98 to 205.
It opened with expectations that it might do $3.5 million a year. It opened at 7.5 and it grew to 10. It grew to the highest grossing movie theater in the whole Sacramento metropolitan region. Really surprised us. We thought our theater patrons would come from El Dorado Hills, Cameron Park, Shingle Springs, and Latrobe. We ended up selling more movie tickets into Amador County than the theater in Jackson did. It was just a remarkable success. Yeah, Tony.
You know, when you finish, I want to just give a little bit of the present trends in shopping and demographics, where people are coming from, and the successes and failures and all that when you get through.
Well, I don't have much more to say, only that I would second what Tony says.
Well,
The project will never be done.
Yeah, when Doug talks about attracting the people in the movie theater and all that, Natalie and their marketing staff do surveys every time we have a concert, and we keep track of the people coming from, and we're finding out that 40% of the people come from El Dorado Hills, and 60% come from outside of the area, and about 35% comes outside of El Dorado County. And this tells a lot that if we would have built this just for El Dorado Hills, it would have made it. We could have had 2 or 3 restaurants, but we have 22 eating establishments. And that's what brings the people out. That generates a lot of tax dollars. Mercedes brings a lot of tax dollars. The TOT tax, our hotel runs a high 80% occupancy that are occupied over the weekend. It's hard you can get a room. So we created a lifestyle that is desired by a lot of people. And go ahead.
Well, then hats off to Natalie. I mean, the concert series, 1,500 people a week come out. It's free. It's just a part of building community. In closing, Tony, I want to say thank you for your vision, and thank you especially for being faithful to your vision. He shared with me a few times the offers that Walmart made again and again and again and again to take a big chunk of that 94 plan.
I could have been driving a new Mercedes instead of an old one. I could have had a house in Serrano instead of 4 Seasons. I live in a 2-bedroom house in 4 Seasons.
One of the great lessons I've learned from Tony along the way reinforced something that we all know, which is we're supposed to be good stewards, and especially with the land, with the places that we live. And Tony, you have just been a spectacular friend, a spectacular man to work with, and a great steward.
Thank you.